In this video, we'll take a look at how we can control Final Gather. Controlling Final Gather is done through the accuracy, point density, and point interpolation. The accuracy is the number of rays being cast by Final Gather. The more rays, the cleaner the render will be. Let's take this up to 400 rays. And let's turn up the point interpolation by double to 20. We'll put this in the buffer and we'll render this out. With this completed render, with the higher accuracy and interpolation, we get a slightly better result. You can see a little bit of difference in some of the darker areas of the render, but it's at a pretty big time. We go from 10-second render to about a 30-second render. Of course, all of these jagged little edges have to be controlled through the quality tab. We have a low sample setting, so if we turn that up and turn our anti-alias contrast down a little bit, we'll have much cleaner renders overall. Now, the lighting I'm still not happy with. I believe it's a little too dark, so I want to turn up the incandescence. However, there's only so much more I can turn it up before I hit the end of the slider. But you can go higher than 1, which is white, by simply typing in a number here in the value. Let's go to 1.5 for value. It still shows up as white, however, that value, that brightness, is 1.5, where before it was closer to 1. Put this in the buffer. We've increased our sample rate, and let's go ahead and render. As you can see, as this render finishes up, you've got a much brighter response with the 1.5 on incandescence, and you've got a much cleaner render with a higher sampling rate. We've incurred a little bit more of a time penalty between then and now, but we have a much better result. You can see details and you can see clean edges much better than before. Now, to get into the Mia shader, we're going to play with the glossiness and turn that down even more to get a more waxy feel out of these objects. And to compensate for some of the noise that will come up in the less glossy reflections, we'll turn up glossy samples to 16. We're also going to turn on secondary diffuse bounces. In the Final Gather settings, secondary diffuse bounces account for the number of times light comes in and bounces in the scene. If I turn on and have a secondary diffuse bounce, I should get more light in my scene. We'll save this in the buffer and we'll hit render. Now, as this render begins to finish up, you'll notice that there's more even light throughout the scene, and that's from the secondary diffused light. You'll notice that the dark areas, the crevices and the contacts, are more filled in with light than they were before. You'll also notice that the reflections in the objects are much softer. Notice how the secondary diffuse bounce fills in the scene with more light. We'll probably want to decrease our incandescence on our dome Lambert. We can do that quite easily. Let's go take that back down to about 1.1. And let's go into our Mia shader and increase our glossiness just a little bit. And then increase our samples quite a bit more to 24. We'll want to try to get a cleaner render as we can. Go ahead and render this out and take a look at its final. As this render finishes up, we see a much nicer waxy feel on these fruit objects and a more filled in light from the secondary diffuse bounce. In this video, we took a look at how to control Final Gather to get the desired results you need for your renders.